Hello, I am Horrorama, and today I have found 6 short yet intriguing stories and experiences that multiple people have posted on various subreddits. But before we begin, I did want to ask you that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. And also, if you have any kind of experience or story that you would like to share and have it be narrated on this channel, then check out the subreddit in the description below. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first encounter has been posted by user HallJack96. I have always denied anything supernatural, but this experience changed my view on the world. I am now obsessed with reading people's stories or anything new that has been posted about these things specifically. Here is my story to share with all of you open-minded folk. First of all, here's a little bit about the area it happened in. I live just off the Isle of Skye in Scotland. In the village where I live, there's 2 bridges linking the mainland to Skye. Between the bridges is a wee island that has a lighthouse and 2 cottages going back hundreds of years. Famously, Gavin Maxwell resided in one of them. Anyway, there's always been a lot of folklore around Lighthouse. Everyone who has worked there over the centuries has always said the same story, which is that they heard loud voices calling loudly outside the building and a massive change in atmosphere. But none of these workers who stayed there, from countries all over the world, could ever identify where exactly it was coming from or understand what this language was. Nor did they see who or what was calling out. Regardless of this, I don't know if perhaps my experience is linked to the folklore, but it did happen in the exact same area, which for me personally made my encounter all the more creepy. So now, the encounter. One night in the spring of 2019, I was running the Skye Bridge after work at around 9 p.m. I stopped to take rest on the first smaller bridge between the cottages and the mainland. The bridge was in complete darkness, and I was using my torch to see where I was going. I leaned on the barrier to catch my breath, looking out over the moonlit loch. When I turned my head and looked in the direction of the distant streetlights about 100 meters or so away, I was utterly stunned. The hair stood up all over me, and my nerves were shot to pieces. I locked my eyes on what seemed to be a 12-foot giant, blurry stick figure across the road, almost the height of the streetlights. It had no features other than see-through shades of dark blue and black. Its legs and arms were the same long, thin shape of its body, as was its tall, featureless, squared head. What's more disturbing is the millisecond I saw it, I felt an overwhelming feeling of vulnerability and dread. It was a dramatic change in the air and a very terrible atmosphere. The scariest part for me was that when I watched this thing cross the road from the right side of the road to the left, it took long, smooth, slow strides, didn't seem to make contact with the ground at all. It almost glided with its steps. When it reached the other side, it went through the stone wall that follows along the road into the darkness, and then instantly reappeared back on my side. It then proceeded to cross the road over and over. This happened around 5 times until it just never reappeared again. This is the only thing I've ever witnessed in my life I cannot explain, and it utterly shocked me to my core. And now, I really am just mesmerized. There really are weird things going on in the world. Since that day, I'm very nervous about going through there. It's always in the back of my mind, even when I drive to work in daylight. Please, if anyone on here has had a similar experience, please tell me. I had never even heard of anything like this before. Not even something like Slenderman. Then I find online that people have actually had incredibly similar experiences to me. That made it crystal clear in my mind that I really had seen something, and it can't be just a trick of the light or whatever else. I've been fascinated ever since. Thank you. The next encounter is imposed by user Strange Callings. I am fascinated by this sub. Our family cat used to run outside, park her butt near a tree, then run away when I got close enough to grab her. Rinse and repeat once or twice. Then she'd let me snatch her up and take her back inside. Anyway, one night I went to take out the trash late at night, half asleep. She ran out the door towards the tree and stopped short. I approached and caught a glimpse of what looked like a pale white, child-sized creature, but far too skinny, elongated limbs. I didn't register what it was wearing, only that it looked very pale, ghastly white. I only saw it for a moment before it slipped behind the tree. It took every ounce of courage I had to get that cat. I got close, she bolted past the tree, so I had to walk past it. And of course, there was nothing lurking behind it. I grabbed the cat, ran inside, freaked out for a minute, and then told myself that I was just tired and maybe just saw something and my mind was playing tricks on me, and I would try to forget about it. A few weeks later, I'm cleaning out the dryer. It vents under my house, which I don't love, but that's how the house came. Anyway, I had the hose detached, and while I'm sucking up the lint, a pale, skinny hand popped up in the hole in the floor and snatched the sock. I shoved the dryer back over the vent so fast and didn't hook it back up until my spouse came home. I told myself it was a raccoon hand and moved on. A little while after that, my neighbor, who honestly is a bit odd, so I take everything she says with a grain of salt. She says to me that she doesn't feel comfortable going outside at night and that I should be careful. I asked why, and she said, because of the skinny people. It's been a couple years, and I haven't seen anything else. Then I heard about crawlers on TikTok. Google took me to Reddit, and yikes, I am not sleeping tonight. The next encounter has been posted by user Teratoni93. I came across this subreddit a few days ago and figured I'd share a sighting. This is not my personal experience, but my wife's, and she said it was okay for me to share here. I was not present during the incident. The sighting occurred in March of 2021. My wife and her friends had microdosed mushrooms around 6 p.m., and the sighting happened around 3 a.m., so they had plenty of time to sober up. If you've ever microdosed, you know it's not an intense trip, just a head change and a feeling of euphoria with no visual or audio hallucinations. We have spent hours trying to find the Airbnb listing where she stayed, but to no avail. There was a falling out with the friend group she was with, so asking the friend who reserved the place isn't an option right now. Now, with all of that out of the way, here's the story. The guest house they rented was on a farm next to a gun range. The guest house was on a small hill with a gravel backyard overlooking an enclosure to the left of a barn with motion sensor floodlights. The farm had horses, goats, and a lab that roamed the property. The night my wife and her friends saw the crawler, they had been hanging out, chatting, and stargazing. Around 3 a.m., she and two of her friends stepped over to the backyard to smoke a cigarette. As they were talking, they noticed the floodlight near the barn turn on, but they didn't see anything moving around. The light eventually went out, leaving it dark again. The patio light from the house didn't illuminate the hill, so they couldn't see too clearly. After the light went out, one of her friends pointed down and exclaimed loudly. When my wife looked down the hill, she saw two almond-shaped eyes reflecting light like a cat's eyes in the dark. She could make out the silhouette of something crouching and staring up at them. She thought it was a mountain lion at first, but then it did something that freaked her out. After a few seconds of staring, it crab walked or sidestepped up the hill, facing them the entire time, to the side of the house. She drew a picture of this. The crawler stayed within darkness and blended in. She could only make out its upper torso, eyes, and arms, since the patio light didn't reach the side of the house either. It was slender and didn't have thick fur or anything. It was also extremely quiet. They couldn't hear it screaming on the growl. At this point, her other friend picked up a couple of handfuls of rocks and threw them at it. It darted off, still crab walking and facing them, back down the hill. My wife and her friends ran inside. They ended up not falling asleep because of how scared they were. The friend who threw the rocks refused to talk about what she saw, yelling at my wife that she was over the whole trip. My wife and the other friend walked around the house looking for footprints in the dirt once it was light, but they couldn't find anything. On the drive back, one of the other friends who didn't see the crawler was asking questions, so my wife looked up crawling humanoid on her phone, and the second picture that popped up is what she says best describes what she saw that night. She still gets chills telling the story to this day. What do you all think? I've heard that the area near there is known to be an active hotspot for paranormal activity, cryptids, UAPs, etc. It is near Camp Pendleton, which is an active marine base. I do want to try and go back with her to visit. The next encounter is imposed by user CZ2100. Everyone I know personally has heard me talk about them. Having no other name for them, I refer to them as the Loping Grey Men. They were thin, elongated, and moved on all fours with a loping gait. I grew up in New Jersey in the late 70s and early 80s. The first time I saw one is hazy. I was maybe 6 years old. My best friend and I were playing a game, while our moms were upstairs, talking over coffee. This was 1983 maybe. I remember my friend and I looking at each other simultaneously, looking out the back sliding glass door, and we both saw something. It was standing behind an above-ground pool. When we met its gaze, it stood up and then ran across the yard on all fours. We went shrieking upstairs, and our moms tried to calm us down. I remember describing it as bigger than my dad and moving on all fours, not like a dog, but like the big rabbit monsters in the Dark Crystal. After a bit, we were calmed down and convinced it was a neighborhood kid looking to scare us. That was the end of that, just kids being scary. I saw them several more times over the years. I never felt that they were threatening. I never felt like they were dangerous, but they always scared me. No one ever believed me. I eventually was convinced that I was sick and needed help. I put myself into inpatient therapy at 18. Nothing came of it. I had never touched a drug. I had never even tried alcohol. They couldn't find anything wrong with me, so they told me to move on. I joined the army and moved away. When the internet came around, I kind of tied what I had seen as a kid into the Dover Demon. I then discovered this subreddit, poking around after seeing a video of a crawler. I showed it to my wife, and she was like, "That's exactly what you've always described." The video might not have been real, but it looks like and moves like the loping gray men of my childhood. I haven't seen them since I was 17, but I no longer feel like I was crazy and got over it. I feel like many others have seen them, and I decided to share my experiences here. The next encounter has been posed by user VastPost9722. On the 15th of May this year, my friend and I, along with a couple of other friends, had a sleepover. In the night, when everyone else was asleep, my friend and I stayed up, talking about skinwalkers and other scary things, from around 2:30 a.m. to 4 a.m., and eventually fell asleep at around 4:30. That night, I had a dream about a skinwalker. In the dream, I was in a hotel that had 2 floors and a separate room with a staircase. My dreams are not very clear and often change locations, so I don't remember all the details. At one point, I was lying on my side on a bed, possibly still in the hotel. Right in front of me was a white cat, staring into my eyes and occasionally smiling. Its eyes were wide, with too much white showing, and it seemed unusually intelligent and conscious. The way it was staring and smiling made it clear that it meant no good. Later in the dream, I found myself in a room with a couch at the other end, and I think the walls were a dark green color. I knew I was in one of my friend's cousins' houses, even though I had never seen any of her cousins or knew what their house looked like. The cousins were walking around the house, in and out of the rooms, doing something, but a couple of them were sitting on the couch. Beside one of them was the same white cat, staring at me from across the room, just like it did on the bed. I was scared for my life the entire dream, because I know that skinwalkers aren't quite friendly. The dream ended somewhere around that point. Fast forward to the day, June 12th, 2024, at around 8:30 p.m. The same friend was out for a walk in the woods near his house, about half a kilometer away. Between the woods and his house was a crop field. We were talking on the phone during his walk. When he was returning home, he said he saw a white cat staring at him through the grass. We instructed him to head back home because it was getting dark. As he walked back, the cat continued to stare at him. It turned out my friend was pulling a prank on us with the cat, although it was actually staring at him. He doesn't think it was anything supernatural. Additionally, about half a year ago, I heard some strange noise in my neighborhood. They sounded somewhat like a dog, but not exactly. More like multiple different kinds of animals were mixed in with the barking of a dog. I've heard these noises twice now, with the second time being about a month ago. Could it be that we, or I, am being haunted? The next encounter is imposed by user Tears and Rainbows. When my family and I went to visit our relatives in Kansas, my brother saw something that has haunted me ever since. We were spending time at one of my mom's cousins' houses, enjoying their pool. They live in the middle of nowhere, and we stayed until dark. As we were packing up to leave, everyone was talking, and I noticed I didn't see my brother anywhere. I turned around and saw him staring into a neighbor's backyard. When I approached him to ask what he was doing, he didn't respond. He stood completely still, his face frozen in shock. I grew genuinely concerned because I had never seen him like this before. As I kept asking him what was wrong, he just started crying silently, his face still stuck in that shocked expression, and he pointed towards the woods. Everyone around us started freaking out, unsure of what was going on. After a few minutes, he finally managed to say that he saw something with long, hairy front legs and a sloth or deer-like head. I was terrified because his reaction was so intense and unlike anything I had ever seen from him. He couldn't speak or move, and tears just silently rolled down his face. I immediately walked him to the car, trying to reassure him that I would protect him. I tried to cheer him up with funny videos, but he remained silent and expressionless. When we got back to my grandmother's house, we all walked silently to our room for bed. My sister and I had comforted him all night because he couldn't sleep and was still scared the creature was outside. My brother is usually brave. He loves horror and gory video games, stories and movies. He's a fan of Resident Evil, Cry of Fear, Fallout, Silent Hill, the whole thing. So for him to be this scared, I believed him completely. Kansas is known for skinwalkers, but up until then, we had never experienced anything like that. We live in Georgia, and while scary things do happen in the woods, I've never experienced something so real and terrifying. Although the fear of the unknown is a very real thing, I do truly believe that the fascination of the unknown is just as prevalent in the human psyche. If this was not the case, then I doubt humanity would have ever even discovered half of the things we know today. Since it takes a tremendous amount of courage and obsession to plunge yourself into the unknown for the faint hope that you might uncover a mystery or simply gain a slightly deeper understanding of the world. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations. But even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.